Ready as ever.
Here we go.
All right, check this out. What? Yeah. All right. Good morning, everyone. Good morning. We have Talmud Torah sponsorships for the month of Teves. Ushi and Mindy Schreiber in the Schutz of Refuah Shlema for Eliyahu Rafael Ben Miriam, Mati and Chanalei Margalit in memory of Mati's father, Yosef Shlomo Moshe Shmuel Ben Yekutiel Yehuda, whose yahrzeit is Chav Dal Teves. Daf Yomi sponsor for today, Florence Davidson in memory of Bracha Strimber, and a late-breaking sponsorship, Mark and Elsa Lussman, who are sponsoring yesterday's daf, Kuf Aleph, 101, in honor of Elsa's mother, Goldie Cantor's 101st birthday, which was also yesterday, December 24th. So we'll give her the extra daf. We'll sponsor. We'll give her 102 as well. So for next year, in advance for next year, as discussed. Okay. Today's daf, Kuf Beis 102. We are picking up on Kuf Aleph Amud Beis. It is the second wide line. So, quick reorientation. Rav brought down a maimer. Rav told us that Moshe Rabbeinu was a Kohen Gadol. And we're now going to go through a series of questions on whether that is, agree with that. Okay, so, Meisivei. Last word on the line. Meisivei. Lechem elokav mikadshei kadashim min kadashim yochal. So pasuk is teaching us about a balmum, a kohen balmum, that is allowed to eat kachim, and it says those are the words of the pasuk. So we ask im nomru kachei kadashim lama nomar kachim kalim. So if the pasuk is going to tell me kachei kachim, why does it also need to say kachim kalim in the verse? Im nomru kachim kalim lama nomar kachim. Why does the pasuk have to tell us both? Why can't it just tell us one, and we'll know that a balmum is allowed to eat in all kachim? So the Gemara answers, Ilulo namar kachim kalim. Let's say the pasuk did not reference kachim kalim and only had told us about kachei kachim. Hayisi omer kachei kachim hu da'ochel, that a kohen balmum can only eat from kachei kachim. Why? Shari hutru lazar v'lahem, because kachei kachim are permitted for consumption for a zar and for kohanim. And we're going to get into that. That's where the questions are going to come from. Let's take it for granted that by kachei kachim, they can be eaten, or certain times can be eaten by a zar as well as the kohanim. We're going to get to that. That's the question brought down. But kachei kachim, however, kachei kachim le'yochel, they wouldn't. The balmum, I wouldn't know from the pasuk otherwise that a balmum kohen can eat kachei kachim. V'ilu lo namru kachim kachim, and let's say the opposite. Let's say the pasuk did not specifically reference kachei kachim and only said kachim kalim. Hayisi omer bekachim kalim yehei ochel shehin kalim. I would have thought that a kohen balmum can eat from kachim kalim. Why? Because they're at a lower level. They're more kal. Bekachim kachim lo yehei ochel. But I would not know that a kohen balmum can eat from kachim kachim as well. Lekach nomru kachim kachim lekach nomar kachim kalim. So therefore, the pasuk said both kachim kachim and kachim kalim. Okay, now here comes our question. Katana miha. Shari hutru lazar v'lahen. However, right, we saw when we were bringing in our proofs, or why we need both sets of kachim to be mentioned in the pasuk. We said it's because the kachei kachim can be eaten both by a zar, a non-kohen, as well as the kohanim. So isn't that lav Moshe? Isn't the zar that's being talked about Moshe? And we'll see in Rashi. It's actually early up in Rashi, the Rashi of Shari hutru lazar v'lahen. Kasakadaitach, we would have thought hutur lazar b'Moshe kamara. It must be talking about Moshe Rabbeinu, and where do we know that from? She'achal chazav v'shok hamilum, right? Because we know specifically that Moshe Rabbeinu ate from the chazav v'shok and the el hamiluim, which is kachei kachim. So we have an instance where we have a non-kohen eating from kachim kachim, and therefore we would not have been able to make the same inference. So Rav Shesh's answers no. Lo bibama. When we're talking about hutru bazar, it's not about Moshe Rabbeinu, because right we're trying to defend Rav that Moshe Rabbeinu was a kohen. Rather, we're talking about the bama. We're talking about on the bama, lizar. So the zar is eating at a bama. K'divrei amar yesh mincha, and only according to the opinion that is yesh mincha. And again, let's look in Rashi. Lo bebama ka'amar. It's about 5 lines up in Rashi. The hudru lizar. K'divrei amar beparak achron yesh mincha bebama ketano mincha kachi kachim. Mincha is a kachi kachim. V'ochlin shiareha, and you're allowed to eat the shiraim of the mincha. Zar or the zarim. The zarim are eating it. Why? How you ovdim babama ketana shazar oved, because we know that you don't need a kohen to do avoda by a bama, so we know there are zarim doing the avoda, and therefore they're eating the shiraim of the mincha, and so we have an instance where a zar is eating kachim kachim. And if we skip down a few lines in Rashi, why is it only according to the opinion who says there's a mincha by bama, which we had a few weeks ago, maybe a few months ago. If you don't hold that there's a mincha, ein l'cha od kachim kachim. We don't have any other instances where a kachim kachim are eaten by a bama. Why? You don't bring a chatas and asham. There's not the megillah. Kol she'ein nidav nidav ein karav b'bama. You can only bring something that you can bring a voluntary offering from at a bama. And there's no neder and nedava, but kachim kachim. There's no only an ola and a mincha, which again, ola obviously none of it is eaten, and so that's why we have to hold the opinion that it is a mincha. Okay, but either way, we deflect the question against Raf. So let's bring another one. It's the bottom line on Kuf Aleph on base. Mesiveh. Miriam Mihiskira. So Miriam, right, we know the episode when in the Midbar when Miriam is inflicted with saras. So we know that in order for somebody to be inflicted with saras, or to officially have to go outside of the camp, there has to be a kohen that looks at the saras and says, yes, this is saras. They have to by words, they have to vocally say you have saras, and it has to come from a kohen. So the question is, who is the kohen that performed this? So Im Tomar Moshe Iskira, if you want to say it was Moshe Rabbeinu, Moshe Zaru. Well, Moshe is a Zar, so it can't be. I mean, obviously that'll be our question. We'll get to it in a minute, but let's keep going through. Vein Zaru as an Agam, and a Zar can't be Rowan Agam, only a Kohen can be Rowan Agam. Im Tomar Aaron Iskira, so okay, well, about Aaron a Kohen, he could have done it. Aaron Karov, who Aaron is her relative. Vein Karov Roas and Agam, and a Karov, a relative cannot look at the Nagam. So actually, it's interesting. So obviously, Aaron and Moshe have the exact same relationship to Miriam. They're both Krovim. So the question is, why by Moshe do we not use the same thing? Why don't we say Moshe can't because it's a Karov? So the Maharsha brings down, the simple answer is, yes, that would have also been a problem for Moshe, but Moshe doesn't even get off the ground, right? He's not even a Kohen, so you don't even need to get to a psul of Karov. He's a Zar. So that's why we go with the Zar answer, because it's just an easier one. Another answer is that it's actually Malokas, whether a karov can be Rowan Nagaim. I believe it's the opinion of Rabbi Meir. So based on, I think, some of the midrashim in the Sifri, it's clear that Aaron held that a karov is not able to be Mar Nagaim. But it's possible that Moshe Rabbeinu had Machlokas. Maybe Moshe Rabbeinu did not hold to the Shita, and maybe Moshe Rabbeinu held that a karov can be, and therefore we had to go to the psul of Zar. And the final answer that I saw, which was very interesting, I thought it was interesting, is that what exactly happened? Let's take a step back. What's the episode happening here? Moshe, Aaron, and Miriam are out in the Midbar. Why? Because Miriam and Aaron were speaking Lashon Hara about Moshe Rabbeinu. So what's the reason why a karov, why you think you could not be married again for a relative? You might think that you have, because of your relationship, because of your love for the other person, you might maybe not intentionally lie, but you might see things in a different light, something like that. So, again, Moshe Rabbeinu, Anav Mikal Adam, but still, even just the Havamina is that maybe Moshe Rabbeinu, at this instance, he's in the situation because Miriam spoke Lashon Hara about him. And so maybe there's some type of diminishment in the Ava that Moshe had for Miriam at that moment, and maybe the psul, you might say again, I don't think that he's bringing down that we actually thought that, but there could be a havamina to say that maybe the psul of Karav doesn't apply in this moment because it's literally Moshe is the person that she just spoke Lashon Hara about. So you say even if you want to say that, you still have the psul bazar. I thought it was interesting to even think that would be havamina and Moshe Rabbeinu, but again we have the psul of Zar, so might as well go with that one. All right, anyway, sorry, tangent. I guess it's a holiday schedule, so little tangent. Fine, back to the Gemara. Third line in. Ela kavod gadol chalak l'Hakadosh Baruch Hu. So rather, okay. So we said who is one who looked at the negaim of Moshe of Miriam. Could have been Moshe, he's a Zar. Could have been Aaron, he is a Karov. Rather, Kavod Gadol Chalak LaKadosh Baruch Hu. Rather, it was a great honor that HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave to Miriam at that point. Miriam, Osasha, said, Ani Kohen. So HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, I'm a Kohen. Vani Maskira, Ani Chalta, Vani Potra. So Hashem is the one that's going to be Mar Nagam for Miriam. Fine. But either way, Ketani Mias, we had our question which we knew right from the beginning. Moshe Zar. We said specifically Moshe Zar. So obviously that is refuting the opinion of Rav that Moshe was a Kohen Gadol. Rav Nachman Bar Yitzchak says, no, Shani Maris Nagam. Maris Nagam is different because it doesn't just need a Kohen. What does it need? Aaron Ubanav Ksuvim Parsha. It says that Maris Nagam are specifically by Aaron Ubanav, not just a Kohen. And obviously Moshe is not part of Aaron Ubanav. Okay. So we deflect that question. Another question on the sheet of Rav. Mesidei. Chamesh smachos haisa Elisheva Yisera Albanos Yisrael. There are 5 great simchos, 5 great accolades that Elisheva, who is Aaron's wife, was zocha to. Yivama Melech, her brother-in-law Moshe Rabbeinu was a Melech. Isha, her husband, Kohen Gadol. Aaron, a Kohen, was a Kohen Gadol. Binah, her son Eliezer. Skan, he was the Skan Kohen Gadol. Ben Binah, what about her grandson Pinchas Mashiach Melchama? He was the Kohen Mashiach Melchama. The Acheha and her brother Nachshon Nasi Shevet. He was the Nasi of Sheva Yehuda. So those are the 5 things. But Avela, and then on the flip side, obviously, she's also dealing with Ashnei Baneh. She was also been in Avelis, however, at the end of Miluim on her two sons, Nadav and Avihu. Either way, Katani Mias, we see here Yivama Melech. It says it calls Moshe Rabbeinu a king. So Melech in Kohen Gadol lo. Obviously, he's a king and not a Kohen Gadol. So the answer lo. Ema Af Melech. Just an extra accolade. He could have also been a Kohen as well. Okay. So we don't disprove Rav. Instead, tonight we're going to say that actually it is a machlokas tanaim whether or not Moshe Rabbeinu was a Kohen. Because the pasuk says, "Vayichar Hashem b'Moshe." When Moshe is at the snet, the burning bush, and he keeps telling Hashem he doesn't want to go, and finally it says Hashem gets upset at Moshe. Vayichar Hashem b'Moshe. Yeshua ben Karcha Omer, Kol Choron Af Shebetorah Nemer Bo Roshim. Anytime we see the lashon Choron Af, it means there has to be a roshim. It's not just an emotion, there is some kind of effect, whether it is a curse or a physical act, there's something. A choron af is not simply a state of being, there is some active component to it. However, but in this case, we don't see any roshim. We just see that Hashem got angry at Moshe, but no ramifications, no repercussions. So Rishon ben Yochai Omer, after nemer bar roshim, no, there is a roshim here. Shene'amar, continuing on in that dialogue, Hashem says, "Hello, Aaron achicha halevi," that he says, "Aaron, your brother, the Levi, he's on his way." Fellow Kohen, Aaron's not a Levi, Aaron's a Kohen. So Achikamer, this is what it's saying. Ani Amarti, Hashem says, initially I was going to say, Ata Kohen v'hu Levi. You, Moshe, you're going to be the Kohen, and Aaron is going to be going to have the Levium. But Achshav, and now because of this Charonaf, now who Kohen v'Ata Levi? I'm switching it around. Aaron is now going to be the leader of the Kohanim, and his sons are going to be Kohanim, and you're going to only be a Levi. The Chachamim say, Lo niskain Moshe ela shivas me'amlum bavad. No, that Moshe Rabbeinu was actually only a Kohen, and he only served in the Beis HaMikdash only during the shivas me'amlum, but was never intended to be a long-term Kohen. The Yeshomrim, and the finally we see Lo paska kuna ela mizashal Moshe, that Moshe Rabbeinu himself actually was a Kohen, so this is where we see that it's a machlokas tanaim. However, his children were not Kohanim. That's where it stops. Shenemar Moshe Isha Elokim Banav Yikru Al Shevet Levi. That Moshe, right, his sons will only be a Shevet Levi, but not Kohanim. Va'omer, and we also say Moshe va'Aaron b'Choanav v'Shmuel Karei. We see Moshe and Aaron grouped together, both as Kohanim. So we see, according to the Yesh Omrim, that Moshe and that Moshe was a Kohen, in fact, but his children were not Kohanim. So my Omer, then we ask, why do we need both psukim? Why not just one? Just to say that Moshe's kids were Leviim, and he was a Kohen. You might have thought Ledoros Udiksiv. I would have thought that it's only talking about Moshe not being a Kohen for Doros, but Moshe himself also is not a Kohen. So Omer, we have to say Moshe Aaron Kohen. No, in fact, Moshe must have been a Kohen because we see Moshe and Aaron grouped together as Kohanim. Okay, now we are going to go on a little digression on Charon Af. The Chol Charon Af Shebatorah. Is it true that really, right, we asked this question on the episode with Moshe and Hashem, so now we're going to ask it in other episodes. Is it true that all Charon Af does not have a roshim, doesn't have some type of active component. Vaksiv, vayetze Moshe min para b'chariaf. Says Moshe left Paro's palace b'chariaf. We don't see any roshim, right? It's just Moshe was angry and he walked out. Amar Reish Lakish, no sitro v'yatza. Actually says no. Moshe Rabbeinu not only was he angry, he actually slapped Paro across the face when he left. Reish Lakish really say this, that Moshe would do this to Paro. Vaksiv, v'nitzavta l'krasos fasayar. And because it says that Moshe went to meet Paro on the other side of the Yarden of the Nile. V'amar Reish Lakish melechu. Here's Bill upon him. Reish Lakish says, what does it mean that he should give him favor? That Paro's a melech, and even though he's a melech Russia, that you should give him some sort of favor. So we see that. How can we then say that Reish Lakish is the opinion that Moshe slapped Paro across the face? So Rabbi Yochanan Amar Rashu. Sorry, in the same pasuk, Rabbi Yochanan actually says Rashu v'heis panecha bo. Rabbi Yochanan is the opinion in this second pasuk that no, the Nisavta doesn't mean that he should be finding favor, but rather say that Paro is a Rasha, and actually Moshe is being commanded to be brazen to Paro. So the answer is Eipach. Okay, so switch the cheetos. We'll say Reish Lakish in the second name is the one who says that Hey is Panecha, and therefore he can also be the one who says that Moshe slapped Paro across the face. Okay. Now we continue to talk about Amos Malchus. Rav Yanai. La'olam tehe Amos Malchus alecha. You should always have reverence for Malchus. Tiksiv, vayir dekol avadecha ela elai. And Moshe, when he says to Paro, he says, all of your servants are going to come and bow before me. But he didn't have the gall to say, and you, Paro, yourself are also going to bow for me. So we see that there's this bit of kavod that is cholek to the Malchus. Okay. Rabbi Yochanan says from a different place. V'yad Hashem ha'isa el Eliyahu. Where is this pasuk? Hold on. V'yad Hashem ha'isa el Eliyahu. V'yishanim masna v'yash lefnei Achav ad ba'acha Yisrael. So you see that Eliyahu, even though Achav was a melech Rasha, that Eliyahu went in front of him again to show kavod. We see kavod to the Malchus. Okay. Amar Ula says, Bikesh Moshe Malchus, lo nasno lo. Moshe actually wanted to be the king, but it was not granted to him. Tiksiv, Atukrav Halom, because when Moshe was at the sneh, says, don't come, Hashem says, don't come close, but uses the Lashon Halom. Ve'in Halom Elam Malchus, and Halom is a Lashon Malchus, Shenamar, the David HaMelech says, Mi'anochi Hashem Elokim, Ke'evisani ad Halom, again, Halom, that you brought me to Halom, which is to monarchy, to Malchus. So Masav Rava. Yeah. So Rava asked a question we just had earlier. Rabbi Yishmael Omer Yivama Melech. Right? We're talking about Elisheva. We said her brother is a Melech. Moshe Rabbeinu is a Amar Rava. No, Lolu Zarok Amar Halom. Is not just Malchus. It's Malchus that is lasting. That goes not only from this person but also through his entire progeny. So is it true that Halom is Malchus lo ulazaro for all doros? V'hagabe shol diksiv havei ad halom ish. I think it's a pasuk. Hold on. Yeah, havei ad halom ish. So we see the lashon halom by Shaul HaMelech. And obviously we know that Shaul's monarchy was not lasting. Hold on a second, I lost the place. We're going back in. 1 second. Sorry. Who in Zarolo, we see by Shaul, right? Only he was the king and not his progeny. So, you can say, yes, he didn't have a lasting monarchy, but he did have Ishbosheth, his son, who reigned shortly, and so he does have some component of Zaro. That maybe the difference is Shaul's monarchy was supposed to last. It didn't last because of his own gaiva. It was stripped from him. It wasn't that it wasn't supposed to be lasting. He did something that was undeserving, and therefore his monarchy was cut off. Because the pasuk says right when someone is giving gedula, it is lo ulazaro, keeps going for generations. The imhigas, however, if they become haughty, they become haughty. HaKadosh Baruch Hu mashpila. Then HaKadosh Baruch Hu lowers them. Shenamar v'masurim bezikim yalkadum b'chevlei onis. We see that is the reason why Shaul's monarchy didn't last. It's not that it wasn't meant to last. It was that Shaul had a monarchy that was Ladoris, but because of his own gaiva, it was cut down. Okay, that was our slight digression of Agadata for our 100 blot. So back to our quoting our Mishnah. We are about eight or 10 lines down from the bottom. Bali Mumin, Bein Bali Mumin. So the Mishnah, let's go back to the Mishnah. The Mishnah is at the beginning of the parak. The Mishnah said, Bali Mumin, if you had Kohanim that are Bali Mumin, Bein Bali Mumin over and Bein Bali Mumin Kvuim, whether it's temporary or permanent blemishes, Cholkin va'ochlin, they are cholek in the kachim as well as they can eat. So they can eat and they can be cholek. So Gemara asks, so where's the source? How do we know? It's not Rabbanan. Kol Zachar. The pasuk in this pasuk is talking about Karban Mincha. It says Kol Zachar. L'Rabbos Bali Mumin, that comes to include Bali Mumin. So Lamai. What's the inclusion? If it's just telling us that a Baal Mum can eat Harik Farnemer. We had right at the beginning of today, Lechem Elokov, Mikacheh Kadashim Elchal. We already learned that from another pasuk. We already know that Baal Mum can eat kachim. So Elo Lechaluka, it must be that not only can they eat the kachim, but they actually can go and take their portion in the kachim. Okay, Tani Idach, another brisa. Kol Zachar, another Kol Zachar, and this one is Chatas. Yes, this one is a pasuk talking about Chatas. The Rabbos Bali Mumin, again to include Bali Mumin. So am I. Last same question. Ila, if it's for eating Harik Far Amar, we already have the pasuk for that. Ila Chaluka, if it's so that they can take their portion Harik Far Amar, we just said in the previous brisa. So shiachal ainli ela tam v'nasa balmum. I might have thought that perhaps it only applies if you have a kohen that was whole, that did not have a mum, and then became a Baal Mum later in life. Baal Mum Eikaro Minayin. How do we know if you're a Baal Mum from birth that even that kind of kohen can eat kachim and Micholek and kachim? Tamad Lomar Kol Zachar. That's what we have from Kol Zachar. Tani Idach. And now we have a third brisa, and this brisa is talking about Shlamim. This is Chaz of Ashok. Shlamim Tani Idach. No, sorry. Asham, sorry. I'm in the next piece. We'll get to that. We'll get to that on my base. This is Asham, correct. Tani Idach, Kol Zachar, l'Rabbos Baal Mum. Again, we're coming to include a Baal Mum. L'mai, Ila, if it's for eating, we already have Harei Kfar Amar, we have a pasuk. V'ila Chaluka, if it's bicholek, Harei Kfar Amar, we have a pasuk for that as well. V'ila Baal Mum Me'ikaro, right? To have someone that was a Baal Mum from birth. Harei Kfar Amar, we already had that pasuk. So Shiachal, Ainli Ella Baal Mum Kavua. I might have thought maybe only a permanent Baal Mum can eat in kachim, but Baal Mum over. How do we know that even a temporary Baal Mum? Tamalomar Kol Zachar. So Klape Lai, the Gemara asks, why would that seems to be the opposite logic? Why would we think that a Baal Mum Kavu is more likely? I would think a Baal Mum over. It's only temporary. That would be more likely to be able to eat in kachim. So Amar Rav Sheshes, Rav Sheshes agrees, says, yeah, switch it. Then really it's coming to include a Baal Mum over. Rav Ashi, Amar Rav Ashi says, no, Le'olom lo tepoch. No, here's the logic. That we're comparing a Baal Mum over like a Tameh. Again, both temporary statuses. Ma Tameh, Kamad lo Tahar, lo Achil Tameh, even though they're going to be Tahar soon, they cannot eat in the state of Tamah. Afhai Nami, Kamad lo Matakin, lo Achil, while you're still in the state of Baal Mum, until it goes away, you cannot eat. Kamash Balan. Therefore, and that's why that is the bigger chiddush. Okay, but we see from all these three drushos to be marba all different types of Baalei Mumin. Okay, next piece in the Mishnah, Kol she'eino roi. The Mishnah told us, Kol she'eino roi la'avoda, eino cholek b'basar. So a kohen who is not roi to do avoda does not get to take their portion in the basar. Okay, the Gemara asks, below, is that true? Is that true that somebody's not roi to do the avoda, does not get to eat? V'harei Baal Mum. We just said Baal Mum cannot do the avoda, and we just said they can be cholek, they can eat and they can be cholek from the karbanos. And another thing, the inference here is kol she'eino roi. The inference is haroi. That if somebody is roi lavoda, they are cholek. Okay, well then I'll ask on that. Harei tameh bekarbanos tzibor. What about if you have someone who's tameh, who we said I think 2 days ago that is allowed to do avoda for a karban tzibor. So derive avoda ve'no cholek. But we asked the question whether they are cholek, and we answered they are not cholek in their karbanos. So we see that even if somebody is roi to do avoda, like a kohen who is tameh, who's doing the avodah in karbanos tzibor, they are not cholek. So we say we switch it. Okay, no, really, it's roi lachila, not roi lavoda, but it's roi lachila. Okay, so and therefore it works for both of these, right? Because a baal mum is roi lachila, and therefore he's cholek, and the tummy is not roi lachila, and therefore is not cholek. Now we ask for hari katan. What about a katan? Katan de roi lachila. Obviously, katan can eat from the kachem, ve'eno cholek, but a katan is not able to get his own portion. So halakatani, we said no, you can't make inference. We can only teach what's actually written in the Mishnah. We can't make inferences from the lashon of the Mishnah. Okay, so now he asks. So okay, now we're saying we can only learn what's explicitly stated in the Mishnah, and we're not going to make any inferences. Well, let's go back to our two previous cases. We can go back and say we did before, right? Imishum tame, right? If it's tame lokatani, right? We don't have a problem of saying it doesn't say tame because we don't have a problem with tame because it doesn't state the inference that we tried to make of. Roi la'avoda is cholek. You can't make that inference, and therefore it's not a problem. It's not a problem. Tame is no longer a question. Himishum balmum, and the question we had about a balmum, which we actually could have answered from the beginning, even without the katan, is balmum rachmana rabbe. You said yes, this is a principle. The general principle is kol she'eino roi eino cholek. However, balmum has a special dispensation because we have a gzeres hakasa. We learned, or we have a drasha from the pasuk, and therefore we're marba the balmum. Okay, next part of the Mishnah. The Mishnah says. Afilu tame b'shas zrikas damim v'tar b'shas hektar chalavim eno cholek. So even if you have a kohen that is tame just by the time of the zrika earlier on, however, he becomes tar by the time of the hektar chalavim, still he's not cholek. I might have thought that by the time they are cholek at the hektar chalavim, that the kohen is now tame. He's now tar. He should be able to be cholek. But along with that, the Mishnah said no. Okay, so the inference there, hatahar b'shas zrikas damim v'tam b'shas hektar chalavim. So the inference from this Mishnah is that the key point of Tumah is at the time of Zrika. So if we have a Kohen that is Tahar at the time of Zrika, and then later becomes Tameh by the Shas Hektar Chalavim, they still can be Cholek. Okay, so Masnis is the look Abishal, and therefore our Mishnah cannot be like the opinion of Abishal. The Tanya Abishal Omer, what's Abishal's opinion? The Olam Einu Ochel Ad She'etar Mishas Zrika Ad Shas Hektar Chalavim. That in order to eat the kachim, a kohen has to be tahar both at the shas, both at the time of the zrika and at the time of hektar chalavim, not only the time of zrika, like the inference is from our Mishnah. The Amar Kara, how does he learn that? Hamakriv as dam ashlamim v'esachelav. We see the connection of the dam and the chelav together, and therefore we say that according to Abishal, even the Kohen cannot be Tumah even at the time of Hektar Chalavim. It's not just a problem at the time of Zrika. So now we ask, though, within the opinion of Abishal, who says you need to be, a Kohen has to be Tahar, both at the time of Zrika and at the time of Hektar Chalavim. So Rav Ashi asks, Nitma bein tayim mahu. What if he has a period of Tumah in between those two? Right? Do we say b'shas zrika v'shas hektar be'ina and v'ha'ika? Right? That at the official time of the zrika and at the official time of hektar chalavim, this kohen is tahar, and so he's good to go. Udilma achitar mishas zrika v'achas hektar chalavim. You have to have it continuous. It's not just okay to be at point A and point B, but he has to be all the way from point A through point B. He has to be in a state of tara. And we don't know the answer to that. We don't know if it has to be continuous or just at each point. Okay. Amarav. Rava says, "Hi Dina, Rabbi Elazar, Rabbi Shimon, Gemir. I learned this din from Rabbi Elazar, Rabbi Shimon to Amar Bevesa Kise. He taught to me in the bathhouse. So we say he didn't teach it in the bathhouse. He thought about it in the Beit Kisi and taught afterwards. We're going to ask at the end exactly how that's allowed. Right? But again, okay, just giving a little background. This is the background to this din. So we're gonna have a progression here. We're gonna see we're gonna be talking about a kohen who is a tful yom, who he said is not allowed to be cholik in the karbanos. But again, a tful yom is going to be tahar at night. So we're going to see a kohen who's a tful yom going to a tahar kohen and trying to see if he can get him to give him some of the karbanos. See if he can argue his way that even though the tful yom cannot be cholik in the karbanos himself, he wants someone else to give him his portion later on at night when he can eat. So we'll see his arguments. He's going to have a few prongs of arguments. Okay. But tful yom v'amar, I would have thought that a tful yom can come and say to another kohen, Tainli mimincha. Give me some. Okay, I know I can't get a portion of the mincha myself, but give me a little piece of your mincha, and I'll eat with you at night. Amar los, the kohen, the Tahar kohen says to the Tful Yom. Uma'im b'makom sheyafa kochacha b'chatascha, even in a place where the Tful Yom, have a stronger case when it comes to what? Your chatas. And Rashi says, what does it mean? What does it mean that you have a strong case by your chatas? So Rashi, it is a few lines down and over. Why the Kohen ha-mechuyev chatas, any Kohen who's chayav a chatas, even if it's not his mishmar, right? So a Kohen who brings a chatas always has the right to do the avoda and to keep the parts for himself. So we see that a Kohen has extra strength. He has yafa koach when it comes to a Kohen bringing a chatas, right? So chatas is sort of a higher level or a higher koach korban for the Kohen, right? So let's go back in the Gemara. Let's start from the beginning of the response. So Tain li b'mincha, right? The Kohen, the Tful Yom says, give me for the mincha, v'ochel. So Amar, the Tful Yom says, U'ma b'makom sheyava kocha b'chatascha. Even in the case of a chatas, where you, Kohen Tful Yom, have a higher koach, because you can bring your chatas at any point and do the vodah yourself. Tichisicha b'chatas Yisrael. However, I can push you off from Chatas Yisrael, which you're going to see in the next lima, that a Kohen, a Tful Yom, is not allowed to be cholik in the Chatas. So Makom Shehura Kochacha b'minchascha. So now, in a case of a Karban Mincha, where you have less of a power. Why? Because a Minchas Kohen is kulo kol. A Minchas Kohen is all consumed on the fire. So obviously a Kohen does not have very much koach in his own Mincha. It all gets burnt on the Mizbeach. So in a case of a mincha, where you have less of a koch, so certainly I cannot be required to share from this mincha that's brought by Yisrael that I have a chelak in. I'm not going to share with you at night because you have even a lesser koach when it comes to mincha. Okay, so that's what Yom answers back, says, well, you are going to push me off from a chatas Yisrael. Why? Because you're saying yafa koach, but shekishem sheyafa kochi kaf yacha kochacha. So because the same, we basically, he's saying, the Kohen Tful Yom is saying to the other Kohen, we have the same koach, right? We come from the koach of the Kohen. So just like I have a higher koach when it comes to chatas, because I can bring my own chatas, so too you, Kohen, have a higher koach when it comes to a chatas, and therefore, your koach can push me off of a chatas because you have the same extra koach by chatas that I do. However, but mincha, sorry, so but that's by chatas. However, but mincha shekeshem shehura kochi, just like you said, I have lower koach by mincha. You also have a lower koach. So don't tell me you can come push me off with a mincha because I have inferior koach. You also have inferior koach. We're the same. We're both kohanim. Whatever koach I have by chatas, you have. Whatever koach I have in mincha, you have. And that's the important nekuda to understand, because that's going to be the continuing argument back and forth. So rather, Harei Omer, the Kohen Tahor says back, he says, all right, fine, I can't get you with the Kal V'chol, I can't get you from logic, so instead, I'll give him a pasuk. It says, La Kohen HaMakriv Osah Lo Siyah, that the mincha goes to the Kohen that is makrivit. So you know what? You want to come eat? If you can come and be makrivit, come eat. But since you can't eat. We see the connection. So that's why he pushes him off. Okay. So that was a mincha. All right, so he tries something else. So now he says, Tein li michatas. The Tful Yom says, Tein li michatas Yisrael. Okay, fine. I lost on the mincha argument, so give me a little bit of your chatas, and I'll eat with you at night. Amar le. So the Kohen Tar says back, same type of arguments. Uma makom shehura kochi b'minchasi. In a case of my own mincha, where I do not have a very strong koach, because I cannot, right, because it's all eaten on the mizbeach, I can't eat any of my own mincha. I was able to push you off on minchas Yisrael, even though I had inferior koach. So makam shiyava kochi b'chatasi, but now chatas, where I have this extra strong koach, so then I certainly can push you away from chatas Yisrael, because I have this extra strength. And again, the Tful Yom says back the same argument. Amar lei, u'ma'im shedichisani minchas Yisrael shekishem shura kochacha kachura kochi tadcheni minchatas Yisrael shekishem sheyava kochacha kavyal kochi. He says again, we're the same. We have the same koach. So again, if you have extra koach, I have extra koach. If you have inferior koach, I have inferior koach. So that logic is not going to hold water. So he says back. Okay, so it comes to the pasuk. Harei Omer hakohen hamechate oso yochalena. He says, okay, the pasuk says it's the kohen that is mechate, that does the blood, that is the kohen that gets to eat it. So he says, come, do the service, and you'll be able to eat. And of course, the Tzvul Yom cannot do the service, and therefore he can't eat. Okay, so he tries again. He's not giving up yet. Amar lei. Tainli, the Kohen Tzvul Yom says, Amar lei, tainli chaz v'shok. All right, now we're the shlamim that I promised you on the last time. This is the shlamim. So now he says, all right, give me from a shlamim, because the shlamim I get to eat chaz v'shok. I'm sorry, the Kohen, gets chaz v'shok, and the Tzvul Yom says, give me from your portion, and I'll be able to eat it tonight when I am tahar. Amar lei. So the Kohen Tahar says, in a situation where you had extra koach by achatas dichisicha, I was able to push you off mechatas Yisrael. So now, in a case of a shlamim where a Kohen has even greater strength, why even greater strength than a chatas? Sorry. We have a lesser koach in shlamim because you only get the chaz v'shok. It's limited to chaz v'shok. Certainly, I can push you away. So he says no. So the Kohen Tzvul Yom answers back. You can push me away by chatas. Why? I have less of a koach by chatas. Why? Because I can't feed it. I can't give it to my wife and to my servants. So then, but the chaz v'shok, I actually have more koach. Because chaz v'shok, I can share it with my wife and with my avadim. I have extra koch by shlamim. So Rei Omer, again, he answers back with the same pasuk. The Kohen hazorek as tam shlamim lo yiyeh. It's the Kohen who does the zrika. He gets the shlamim. So ba zorek va'achol. Again, if you can come do the avoda, you can come eat. And since you cannot do the avoda, you cannot come eat. And what happens? Finally, the Tzvul Yom gives up. Yotza Tzvul Yom. Kula v'chamura v'arosho. He has all of his kavachomers that he tried to bring are all for naught. And he has onein mimino. He has the onein Kohen on his right, who also has no arguments. Mechuzak kapara bismolo, and mechuzak kapara on the end, and essentially he loses out. And we'll actually get back. I did get the luck. I know the Rav promised the Rambam on Anina, so I have it. If we have, I think I'll have a schedule. We'll have time. We'll have a few minutes. Okay. So all of his arguments were for naught. Parach Rabachai though asks, okay, he could have asked one more. There could have been a fourth argument that this Tzvul Yom put forward. Why didn't he say Leimalei Painli bi Bechor? Why didn't he say, all right, give me a little bit of this Bechor va'ocha? Why? B'shim Damar Lei. He could have said back to the Tzvul Yom Umah b'makom shura kochi b'chatas. Right by chatas, where you cannot give it to your wives and your wife and your avadim. Dichisicha. I pushed you off. I pushed you off from the Chatas Yisrael. But Bechor, the Kulei Dili, Bechor is fully just the possession of the Kohen. Obviously, extra koach there. Certainly, I can push you off there because I have this extra strength. And what's the Tzvul Yom going to say back? Right? He's going to say again, we have the same koach. I also have extra koach by Bechor. You don't have a good kavachomer here. Harei Omer, then so the Kohen who is Torah could have answered back. What about the pasuk says? Es damam tizrok al hamizbeach es chalbam taktir. Right, only one who does the zrika and takder chalavim, that is the one who gets the basar. Bazar k'achal. So go, if you can do it, then you can receive the basar. Since you cannot do the avoda, you cannot get the basar. So again, why didn't Rava bring down this case as well? Rabbi Lazar, Rabbi Shimon, why didn't he bring this case at all? The Idach, what does he say? Idach parech miksiv uvesaram lakohen azorek uvesaram yihiyeh lecha. In the other psukim, it all said the one who did the avoda or the kohen. It had specific language. Here it just says uvesaram yihiyeh lecha. Afilu kohen achar lecha could be to any kohen, so he doesn't have the Xeris HaKasav here, and therefore he cannot make this argument. Let's finish up. Okay, now question we had before. Okay, we said that he learned that. Rabbi Elazar, Rabbi Shimon was thinking about this halacha in the Beis HaKisei. How is he allowed to do that? You're not allowed to have a Horoi Torah in a bathhouse and a Beis HaKisei. Say, L'onso Shani, this was an onus. What does it mean? That Rabbi Elazar, Rabbi Shimon was so engrossed in his learning all the time, for him to not think about learning was an onus. Impossible. Impossibility. So for him, he was actually allowed to think inside the Beis HaKisei about learning, and then was teaching it after. So we'll go very quickly, for 2 minutes, we'll go to the Rambam. on Aninus. I know it's from a couple of days ago, but hold on, I got it up here. The Rambam brings down where we had a question of what exactly, when is Aninus? Is it Deraisa? Is it Derabanan? Well, let's make it a little bigger. Okay, so Rambam says in Hilchos Bias HaMikdash, Perek Beis, Halacha, Tes, and Yud. Halacha Tes says, Ezehu Onein, what is the definition of an Onein? Zeh Shemesh Lo Meis Ben Akrovim Shu Chayav L'Sabel Alehem, and it is Biyom Hamisa Bilvad, only on the actual day of the death. Hu Nikra Onen, that's when it's called an Onen, Din Torah, Mid Oraisa. The Laila, but that following night, so the night of the Yom HaMisa, who Onen Midir from. You are an Onen from Midir Abanan and still cannot eat in Kachim. Okay. And now what about the other cases in Halacha Yud? Umeis Shesha Yom Vachakach Nikbar. Let's say the Gfura is not on the same day as the Misa. So Ka'otza Yamim Sha'achar Yom HaMisa Hu Onen Midivrehem. So from the period of Misa until Gfura, you are the person is considered an Onen Midir Abanan. And then similarly on the Yom HaKfura itself, Eino Tofes Lelo. In both of those cases, the Lila, right, the Lila is not included. So on the Yom HaKfura, you are an Onein Midirabanan, but it does not drag in that night of Anina. So when we talked about before about Kachim, an Onein on the day of, on the Yom HaKfura, you cannot eat Kachim on that day, but you can eat Kachim on that night. I could have just read it here. You actually can do tefillah and eat Kachim at night. Aval Yom HaMisa. However, on the day of Misa itself, Kishem she'aser lechal bo kachim mimin haTorah, just like midaraisi can't eat kachim during the day of Yom HaMisa, kach aser lechal beleila midivrei. The rabbis extended the Rabbanan, you cannot eat kachim on night because you have aninas midrabanan. However, last piece, chutz min haPesach bevad, like we saw in our case, other than the Karban Pesach, shu ochel le'erev k'moshes bar b'mekomo. However, the Karban Pesach, because it has to be eaten only that night, Karban Pesach in Onein is allowed to eat because it's only aninas midrabanan, so you can't eat it at night.